I'm sure everybody knows a friend or family member who's relatively calm and peaceful all the time, but then they have a trigger warning. Let's say you talk about something politically unpopular like Trump or vaccines or the mandates that were going on, or just any minuscule topic that takes their very calm demeanor into an overarching just craziness. And they just start latching out of anger because they don't have real information. All they really know is that what they saw in the media, and they know that the media is right deep down in their heart because every single media told them this. It can't be wrong. Why are you trying to go against the grain? Like, you can't do this, and it hurts them at a very core level. And this has to be some sort of phenomenon that me and Justin were talking about because we both know people dear to our heart who are very nice, educated, incredibly intelligent, smart people that never get angry. I mean, I can think of someone off the top of my head who never gets angry ever. Literally the sweetest person I've ever met. But when one of these things are mentioned that is unpolitically popular, they just go crazy and they lose all rational thought. And I don't know why this is a thing and why it is almost overwhelming a lot of society today.
Yeah, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde problem. So there's two things that immediately come to mind. We'll get to the fifth column problem. Ooh, that rhymes in a second here. The first one is that we've talked about Yuri Bezmenov before with demoralization, and there's a point in there where he's wearing his, Soviet era douchebag style glasses, saying words to the effect thereof. These people have been, programmed to accept stimuli. You can take them to Soviet concentration camp and show them, atrocities, but they will not believe you. Only at the end, when they get kicking their fat bottom with a gun to their head, will they actually realize the truth of the situation. That's the tragedy of it. Only at the end when it's too late. So I'm fond of saying I always know the winning lottery numbers, but my problem is I only know them about a day too late. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is I think back to another clip from came out 2000, Josh, 2000. I think it was 2000. It was the final codec transmission from Metal Gear Solid 2, where basically the villain of the game and one of the villains of the overarching series is talking to you, the player, the main character, and says words to the effect thereof. The entire point of this was to program you. Essentially, you accepted the fiction that we created. You followed our every order. You have done everything we wanted you to do. Your entire persona, your beliefs, your victories, your failures, and your triumphs, they're all just byproducts of a system that was designed to generate and to manipulate you. And it's worked incredibly well. And that was in 2000, so almost 2 decades plus ago. So what does that all have to do with what's going on right now? The concept I ran across some time ago, and I just saw it in passing, but it's something that kind of just stuck with me in my mind, and that's the concept of the fifth column. It's concept's been around a long time, but as I poorly understand it, a fifth column in relation to warfare implies so backing up just a little bit, if you have like a column that's like a military asset, and when I say military asset, like you might have like various troops, legions or whatever, right, in terms of like columns here. But the fifth column implies, let's say, like a large military asset that you have behind your enemy's lines. And so in this context, it would be part of the population of those who you're wishing to make war against. So it might be like saboteurs, spies. Perhaps maybe you've got brainwash, or you've been able to somehow brainwash the population. You've been able to associate various stimuli with them, so that if you say, or if you create a situation where they're literally triggered, a response, and sometimes a violent response is elicited. So politics can do it, social issues can do it. I don't know how to say this on YouTube and keep it friendly, but if you want to see in America, at least go back, a few years, it's maybe has gotten a little better, which is to say it's gotten a little less worse. But there's a certain word that starts with, let's say, the letter N, and if you say that in a social context, you will trigger a lot of people. It doesn't even matter what the context of it is. It's just people have been programmed, to hear it and to respond, and generally violently to it. Anyways, my point from all of this is that if you have, or if there is a fifth column in America right now, and I say this as we now seemingly appear to be engaged in a war on two fronts. Last night, there were reports coming in that we conducted airstrikes against Iranian proxies, I believe, in Syria. But again, it's kind of foggy. You don't quite know what's going on. But either way, you've got the military operations in Ukraine. It looks like you're ramping up to have military operations in the Middle East, and that doesn't seem to be de-escalating. It seems to be escalating. So the point is that the world, at least America, seems to be engaging more and more on a war footing. And that means that if you were a enemy of America, whether you're a state actor or a non-state actor, you would want to be able to figure out ways to project power within America. In other words, create mischief, weaken America, or whatever, right? Because that's just what you would do being on the other side. Anyways, let's say six back into the fifth column. So the fifth column basically is a fancy way of saying a group of people who maybe either intentionally, let's say, the spies or saboteurs, terrorists, whatever, they've been let in, or they've just been a large portion of the population that's been, brainwashed or has been, not brainwashed, let's just say conditioned to react in ways that would weaken their own country, but not necessarily, but they would not necessarily be aware that they have been, that this programming has been done to them. I mean, that's the nature of brainwashing and propaganda. What makes it good is the fact that those who have received it are completely unaware that they have received it.
Yeah,
Uh,
and just before I intervene, I was talking
yeah,
about people who said things about Trump or vaccines. It is the other side as well who
yeah,
get triggered if you talk about anything a liberal. They like the super Republicans and the super Democrats. They have the exact same trigger words on both sides, and
yeah.
it
There were
just
the
it spurs an emotional response from these two groups of people that just cause complete hatred and division, almost as if it was per design.
Yeah, rational thinking shuts down and it becomes a shouting match, which is not conducive to trying to figure stuff out. So there's another aspect too, and ironically enough, it's called fifth generation warfare. And again, like I am war is very much in like the art of war is very much above my pay grade. But again, as I poorly understand it, fifth generation warfare, it's much more geared towards like information of the mind, and this is how I would say it poorly, where you have a strange way where think like like whether you're America, the U.S. or the Soviet Union or the USSR back in the day, in a strange way, like all the major belligerents or potential belligerents across the world, at least let's say since the 80s, they kind of have the ability to turn out the lights across the entire world. And so the traditional ways that you would make war, like, okay, we're going to send a bunch of ships over here, aircraft carriers, have battalions of, soldiers, etc. Well, I guess you can do that, but the problem is so can the other guys. And so there's not necessarily really an advantage to be gained, or if there is an advantage to be gained, it's not immediately apparent to me what that advantage is, because yeah, sure, we might have a lot of material and resources, but well, so does everyone else. Or America might have more than everyone else, but it's the
It's a
advantage is not.
lose-lose game.
Yeah, like it's not like there's like this overwhelming advantage, that we can just roll in and crush. Well, we can probably still win in the end, but it's going to be a bloody nose, broken arms, and we might lose some fingers and toes in the process of it. So that seems to me like the one way where you can actually like get a heads up or an advantage on the other side is through information warfare, and this is where you get back into so information warfare implies information of the mind. And this is where social media comes in, narrative shaping comes in, let's say through like legacy media, whether you're looking at, the New York Times, Washington Post, Fox, Newsmax, just pick whatever legacy media thing you want or mainstream media thing you want. And you see that these narratives or these framings are spun up and shown over and over and over again. And the left is just as guilty as the right, in my opinion, of doing. I mean, they each have their own weak points, but they all are complicit, I think, in doing this, or at least they all are subject to this type of thing. The thing that reminds me of Josh the most is, again, not to relate it back to GME, but with GME, I became aware of how options can drive the price of the underlying. In a sense, you have the tail wagging the dog. And I kind of wonder if that's similar, where you're able to use leverage. In other words, no one can really attack anyone else directly because it just doesn't make sense for the reasons we talked about it before. So let's say you want to make the price, or let's say that you want to take an investment position, or you want to see the price of an underlying of a favorite company of yours go up. Well, yes, you could go out and buy a boatload of shares, and maybe you would see some sort of material aspect on the price to suggest that you had some impact upon your purchase, or your purchase has some impact upon the ticker tape. The other option is that no pun intended, you could go out and buy a bunch of options, and through options you're able to amplify your power, and by amplifying your power, with leverage, and with leverage you can amplify the power and send it on up. You'll probably see much more of an increase in price or a decrease in price if that's your game. And I think when it comes to warfare, you're seeing almost like the same dynamic where you have people who wish to engage and play in this space who aren't attacking directly, but they're using whatever mechanisms they can to amplify their power. And this is where the fifth column comes back in, because if you can use someone with, let's say, a large Twitter account, or a large X account, legacy media, whatever, you can essentially use the credibility. You can piggyback off the credibility, or what people view the credibility of other organizations, to amplify your message out. And when your message gets amplified out to a lot of people, that there's your leverage component, then that message can shape the narrative, and the narrative can call to action the fifth column, if that's what you wanted to do,
Yeah,
or at
but
least
I think that's more weird is if one person was doing that, it would make sense. But when you have all the people that are on the same side saying the exact same stuff to where there is no divergence of opinion, where every single person, let's say mainstream media, has the exact same framework that they are basing their opinion off of, giving zero diversity of thought, that is where you can run into some huge problems where you see people. I'm going to say my late grandmother, for example, because what did she do? Her only consumption of media was the news. She didn't know how to use her phone. She wasn't going to go out of her way. So whatever was on the news, she was assuming, and a rightful assumption at that, that they are going to tell the truth, because why would the news lie to me? Why would they? What advantage do they gain? And in reality, if you are thinking of it from that perspective, there is no uh, gain from someone to lie to you on the news, unless it is a lot deeper than you could ever imagine. And she was one of those people who, any one of those trigger words that came up, she would get mad. This was literally the sweetest old lady you could ever imagine, who was always happy. But when the news talked about one of those things that was against the grain, she would get super pissed and she would be swearing at the TV. And I was thinking, how the hell is this possible? How the hell is this possible? And it caused huge
whose
fights.
grandmother is this? Whose grandmother is this?
And I still can't rationalize how there are so many people like my late grandmother who would get angry at the TV because a name was mentioned. Whereas, and as if anything else in the world were to happen, she would be the happiest, nicest person. Even if someone were to do something horrible to her or horrible to someone else, she would forgive them instantly. But she would have this huge trigger to whatever the media wanted her to. I mean, it seems much darker than just manipulation at this point, and I don't know what it is. There's some sort of phenomenon going on with many people, and I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, probably the most poignant example I've seen of that, and this is from a few years ago, was the one with Sinclair Media. Remember that one? This is very dangerous to our democracy. We had all the regional state. Yeah, that is a narrative that is being shaped and pushed. So, anyways, this is more of kind of like just rambling, just because I don't know what the answer is, but I can, Josh, as you note, say that, listen, you seem to have these narratives, these ways of looking at the world, Nietzsche's horizons, that are eerily the same and eerily prevalent. Now, that's not to say you wouldn't have narratives that are the same, but this is almost like cookie cutter, or it feels like it's approaching cookie cutterness in terms of how similar these things are. So
It is leading to people like myself who I had no reason to be skeptical of anything, because I would assume, okay, there's a high chance that if all the news are telling me one thing, that is most likely the truth. But now I think, holy smokes, if all the news are telling me something, for the past 3 years, it's been a complete lie. So now I am almost censored to think this is most likely a lie, which that is not the way it's supposed to be either.
yeah,
If all the news did was report information and let me come to my own conclusions, then we wouldn't have this issue. But now my brain is thinking, oh my God, they must be lying to me because they've been lying to me in the past. And if you had a girlfriend who cheated on you back in the day, you're gonna think, oh, she's cheating on me. But that's what I think when the news is on spewing something. It is my first reaction. And there's a lot of people like this coming up that once the loss of trust from a counterpart is done, from the government, from the media, from a spouse, from whoever, it is nearly impossible to bring that trust back. And that's what's happening to another huge group of people. And I don't know where the hell this is going to lead, but more divergence. And I wish it was divergence of thought, but does not seem to be going that way.
Well, it's going to. You think that there's a max of like just how silly can people get before they finally wake up and realize? I mean, what's the phrase nowadays? Clown world that you see going around here. Like, I just invert the news in a strange way. Like, if CNN or Fox or MSNBC comes out and says something, well, just assume the opposite. You'll probably be right. I'm not quite sure that's a very healthy or constructive place to be at as a society, but at least it has some functionality to it.
Let me just pose a question to the 6 people that could still be watching this.
Yeah.
Do you see do you see people who are incredibly intelligent, incredibly sane and mellow in nature who get wildly over triggered when a certain person is mentioned or a certain just thought that it is unpolitically correct to think in either direction or
Yeah. And
because
then ask yourself,
I'm seeing this trend of more mellow people get angrier and angrier when something is mentioned, and that can't be good for society. Uh, I don't want to speculate on where that could go, but I will leave that to the imagination.
Josh, until next time.